My name is Blake Anderson, and I'm a registered social worker here in Toronto, Ontario. I've been a therapist for the last 5 years, and I specialize helping people with this dynamic with either emotionally immature parents or I guess have a level of narcissism. And so it's often working with those on the receiving end, that dynamic. And I do different modalities, approaches, family systems theory, and using Bowen. And I've come across your work maybe about 5, 6 years ago, and I've read your book, watched many of your videos, and I understand that you, defined narcissism abuse, and were the first one to really coin a lot of the terms. And so I guess I'll get into my first question, and we'll go from there. That's fine.
Yes, please go ahead.
Great. In this course I'm doing, I've been framing things in either an emotionally mature lens in terms of I take from Lindsay Gibson's work, and I'm sure maybe you've come across her. She sees it as more of a developmental lens where perhaps there's more, optimism in the sense that it's more maybe about how you can communicate with adults that are emotionally mature. I contrast that with your approach. I think you're talking more about the cluster B and about narcissism. That's maybe more dire, but realistic in the sense of these individuals and just the capacity they have. So I guess, how do you make that distinction? There's diagnosed narcissists, and there's also ones who might have characteristics. And I know you probably know that all narcissists are emotionally mature, but not all emotionally mature people are narcissistic. How do you define that and make that distinction? And I understand cluster B was originally seen as immature.
Cluster B is described as erratic or dramatic, the erratic or dramatic cluster. And of course, children are toddlers, to be more precise, dramatic and erratic. So there's a confluence here. Narcissists definitely are emotionally immature. They are stuck somewhere between the ages of 2 and 3, prior to what Mahler called separation individuation. The pathological narcissism is a disruption in the formation, constellation, and integration of a functional self. These people are devoid of a functional self. Ironically, narcissists are selfless. They don't have an ego, if you want to use Freud's language. But emotional immaturity is the least of the narcissist's problems and the least of the narcissist's nearest and dearest problems. Pathological narcissism is an exceedingly severe mental illness. And that is Otto Kernberg, one of the fathers of the field, who essentially claimed that narcissism and borderline are flip sides of the same coin. Pathological narcissism is a defense against borderline personality organization, and then proceeded to suggest that they're both on the verge or on the edge between neurosis and psychosis. In other words, they are pseudo-psychotic, they're almost psychotic. Kernberg implied that narcissism is a form of schizophrenia, attenuated or ameliorated schizophrenia, but a really severe issue. It's not only emotional immaturity, it's not only a Peter Pan syndrome. It's not only someone who refuses to grow up and abjures his adult responsibilities and chores and so on. We're not talking about these kind of people. We're talking about people who, as I said, are devoid of a functional self. We're talking about people who cannot tell the difference between external objects and internal objects. So when they come across you, they convert you instantaneously into an internal object, and they begin to regard you as an extension, as a prop. They are unable to accept or digest or come to terms with your externality and separateness. These are people who have extreme deficiencies in self-concept, in intimacy, in the capacity for intimacy. We are talking about devastation, a wasteland. We're not talking about people who are a bit childish, a bit not serious, they grow up only in their 40s and 50s, if ever. We're not about these kind of people. These kind of people are benign compared to the narcissist. Conflating the two is unwise. Emotional immaturity, in the case of narcissism, is derivative. It's the outcome of adverse and pernicious psychological dynamics and processes. Whereas in classically emotionally immature people, that's the major problem, and it's the primary issue. And you can cope with it. The prognosis for these kind of people is pretty good. It's not a big deal, so to speak. A bit of CBT, a bit of this, a bit of that, internal family system, transactional analysis, you name it. And the results are impressive because these people are mentally healthy. No one has convincingly created a paradigm that emotional maturity is the equivalent of mental health or is a precondition for mental health. No one came up with this. I mean, there's no theory. There are, of course, theories like social learning and this and that, but the conflating mental health with emotional maturity is wrong because mentally healthy. Children are not mentally ill. You need something in addition to being a child. And this is where the pervasive, insidious nature of narcissism comes in. The narcissist has an impact on his environment because he is not a full-fledged human being. He is half-baked. He is, to a large extent, some kind of artificial intelligence. Now, I know this is politically incorrect. You're not supposed to say this. You may lose your job or license if you dare to say these things. But that happens to be the truth. Take away empathy. Take away access to positive emotions. Take away a functional, constellated, integrated self, a unitary core identity. Take away the ability to self-regulate. Take away so many things. What is left? Someone with a few skills? Even if that person is accomplished, is that a person? Is there personhood there? I strongly and greatly doubt this. I think the minimal conditions for identifying someone as a person, in other words, imputing personhood and personality, these minimal conditions are not met in the case of narcissism. Even the psychopath is a lot more mentally healthy than the narcissist. And even to some extent, the borderline in some ways. Empathy, for example, capacity to experience emotions. The borderline is superior to the narcissist. And so we're talking about an extreme case of mental illness here.
Okay, I see. That makes sense. You mentioned the notion that they make you into internal objects and they convert you to internal objects. And I've followed your work and you talk about snapshotting. There's this notion that they have this idealized image of you and they interact with that image. And like I'm thinking with parents, right? You could maybe they have this snapshot of you maybe when you're 12. And I think what you say is that there's healthy people. I think we all have snapshots, I think you said, but that we update it over time and as we get to know the person. But with a narcissist, they might add to it, but it's largely intact. You go back home with your parents, and if they're narcissistic, revert you, it seems, back to this 12-year-old or this young part of yourself. And as long as you go along with that snapshot or the way that I guess you're giving them narcissistic supply, everything is fine. But if you go out of that and be your authentic self, you want to differentiate from the family, that becomes a threat. I'm just curious, is that how you see it, or is there anything I'm missing in what I shared?
The etiology definitely has to do with a family or household setting that is not conducive of a self, not conducive to the formation of an individual, someone divided from the parental figures. I've dealt with this in hundreds of videos. In a nutshell, we are talking about parental figures with a strong emphasis on the mother in the first 36 months. A mother who is not good enough in Winnicott's terms and dead, metaphorically speaking, in Andre Green's language. It's a mother who is emotionally absent, depressive, narcissistic, selfish, or insecure, so she doesn't provide a secure base, a sense of safety. A mother who is clinging and needy, overprotective, spoiling, pampering, idealizing, or idolizing the child, thereby denying the child access to reality and peers. In short, a mother who has no idea how to be a mother, cannot find the delicate balance between being there and not being there. The art of motherhood is about not being, because the mother's essential role is to push the child away, to allow the child to separate from her and then walk away and have a life of his or her own. Many mothers find this a very threatening prospect. So they keep the child tethered and don't allow the child to explore the environment, to interact with peers, and give up on mother. A mother needs to have a stable, grounded core to feel safe and loved enough to let the child go. And these mothers don't. So when we use the terms abuse and trauma in the etiology of pathological narcissism, we don't only mean sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse. These are definitely precursors of both narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. But we also talk about parents, and especially mothers, who would not let go, who breach the child's emerging boundaries, who do not allow the child to develop a self, who won't let the child walk away and explore and discover. Mothers who do not uphold the child's grandiose self-concept initially, what we call healthy narcissism. Mothers, for example, who are overprotective. So there are many forms of abuse. If you instrumentalize the child, if you use the child to realize your own unfulfilled dreams and wishes, that's abuse. If you parentify the child, if you treat the child as your substitute spouse or your substitute father or mother, if you, the child, and all these are forms of abuse and trauma, and they exist in the background of literally all narcissists. That is not to say that pathological narcissism does not have a hereditary genetic component. It stands to reason that there is a genetic hereditary component. And that is not to say that narcissism is not associated with brain abnormalities. Again, it makes sense to assume this. We don't have any proof of these two claims, but they are reasonable claims. Having said all this, your genes and your brain are not going to make you a narcissist unless and until you're exposed to this kind of household. A household that is the equivalent of a permanent, unceasing earthquake, where the parental figure are arbitrary, capricious, and threatening. And so you have no resort and no way to derive a sense of calm and safety, to feel that they are a secure base. At that point, the child gives up on reality. Sigmund Freud was the first to suggest that the reality principle precludes the pleasure principle and vice versa. Like you have to make a choice in life. Either you choose reality or you choose pleasure, but you can't choose both. And the choice this kind of child makes is to give up on reality and to substitute fantasy for reality. The fantasy the child comes up with is very reminiscent of primitive pagan animistic religions. The child comes up with a deity or a divinity, which is the false self, and this deity and divinity is protective, impermeable, immune, untouchable, omniscient, omnipotent. In short, at that moment, the child has renounced reality, usually for life. And that choice, unfortunately, is irreversible. Never mind all the claims by self-interested therapists and clinicians who make a lot of money out of selling useless therapies to narcissists. Narcissism is the totality of the personality. It's a choice to establish a self or to establish a personality founded on counterfactual narratives, fantastic narratives, narratives that involve essentially extreme cognitive distortions about the world out there and about the self-concept. At that moment, the child also becomes very defensive, because when you embed yourself in fantasy, you're opening yourself to a barrage of challenges by harsh, uncompromising, factual reality. So you're constantly on the defense. As you're constantly on the defense, you need to deploy aggression to survive. So it's a very aggressive disorder. And again, there are a variety of manifestations of aggression, but it's essentially an aggressive disorder. There's a close affinity between narcissism and antisociality, or as we call it in the ICD, dissociality. So this is the logical picture. And then you easily understand why the narcissist is incapable of perceiving the external world. Pathological narcissism relies fundamentally on the renouncing of reality, and reality therefore becomes the enemy. It is not that narcissists like fantasy, daydreaming, or even membership in a cult-like political movement. Oh, that's not the same. Because all these people, even psychopaths, maintain reality testing. They're able to tell the difference between reality and fantasy. The narcissist is not able to make this distinction. And in this sense, pathological narcissism is a form of delusional disorder involving even psychotic elements. When the narcissist comes across you, there's a process that I call spotting and auditioning. He says to himself, wow, this guy or this girl, they could be great sources of narcissistic supply, or they could participate in my shared fantasy. At that moment, the narcissist has to internalize you. He has to create a representation in his mind of you as an external object. Because if he were to relate to you as an external object, it would open the gates to reality. And nothing is more threatening to the narcissist than reality. So the only way to interact with you is by creating an avatar, a snapshot, or in clinical terms, an introject, and to continue to interact only, exclusively with this internal object, which then raises the problem, you are real. You are not an internal object. Ontologically speaking, you are an external object. And immediately, this creates conflict. There is a divergence between you as an external object and the fixated internal object in the narcissist's mind. You're alive, you're breathing, you have friends, you have family, you travel, you have a job. Sometimes you're angry and sad, sometimes you're happy and laughing. All this challenges the internal object. And the narcissist feels very threatened by the fact that you exist. And he needs to eliminate your existence. Because if he were to accept that you have agency and personal autonomy, he would have perforce opened the gates to reality. If he were to accept that you can diverge from the internal object, he would be forced to accept your externality and separateness. That is utterly unacceptable. So he needs to eliminate you. It's a process of annihilation and negation. It's at the core of the narcissistic interpersonal pathology. The narcissist introduces death to everything and everyone around him. He injects everything with a miasma of death. He makes everything around him and everyone around him dead, because only dead objects are sufficiently inert and sufficiently predictable to not challenge the fantasy that had become the narcissist. The narcissist vanishes as a child, completely disappears, and becomes the false self. He becomes the fantasy. And whatever the narcissist experiences as a child, he attempts to impose on you as an intimate partner, friend, or a colleague. He attempts to impose it on you. The narcissist never experienced separation from his mother. He does not allow you to separate from him. So there is a symbiotic bond. The narcissist never had the chance to experience reality. He does not want you to be real. He is trying to impose his internal world on you, which is what all humans do. But in the case of the narcissist, this internal world is really sick. And unless you conform to this sickness, unless you agree to become as sick as the internal object, as sick as the fantasy, and ultimately as sick as the narcissist himself, you have no place in the narcissist's life and world. Those who stay, those who stick around, ultimately become very sick. I say that narcissism is contagious.
Yeah, that makes sense. This relates, I think, because you say that narcissist doesn't really gaslight or manipulate necessarily. It's global of who they are. Is that related to what you're talking about? It's like their reality testing's off. And so it's not necessarily they're intentionally gaslighting or manipulating you. Some people say they don't consciously know what they're doing or it's unconscious, but I think you suggest there's a level of cold empathy. They have some capacity to know what they're doing, but they just don't care, or maybe you can clarify that.
First of all, it's important to realize that introjection is a healthy process in childhood. Introjection is the language of object relation schools. But many other theories in many other schools in psychology have the equivalent of introjection. For example, Bandura's social learning theory has the equivalent of introjection, imitation and emulation. So introjection seems to be a real thing. in the case of the child who is about to become a narcissist, the narcissist uses introjection. The child who is about to become a narcissist, so I will use the word narcissist. The narcissist as a child uses introjection in order to create safe representation of people inside a sandbox that is firewalled and allows them to interact with people, to have interpersonal relationships with these introjects rather than with real people. Real people are hurtful, threatening. The child creates replicas, clones of real people in his mind, in his imagination. He creates this sandbox of introjection within which it works. And this sandbox is total and all-inclusive, like a totalitarian regime in Arendt's work. This means that the narcissist never ever, for the rest of his life, exits the sandbox. It's like a child who's playing, and then if you want to play with this child, you have to enter the sandbox. As you enter the sandbox, you have to shed your critical thinking, your reality testing, your personal autonomy, your agency, your independence. You have to shed your affiliations, family, friends. And by the time you've entered the sandbox, you're no longer yourself. You've given up on your identity. As far as the target of the narcissist is concerned, the experience is gaslighting. While it is true that the narcissist does not gaslight, the victim experiences this as 100% gaslighting. The narcissist does not gaslight because he cannot tell the difference between reality and fantasy. When he makes claims about reality, ontological claims about reality, and when he makes claims about his own thinking, epistemological claims, he believes the veracity of these claims 100%. He believes these claims to be 100% truthful. He does not for a second think that he is misleading you or lying to you or deceiving you. On the very contrary, he would insist ferociously that he is the most truthful person ever, the most morally upright and superior human being conceivable. He would defend this. He becomes very defensive about this. And because he cannot tell the difference between reality and fantasy, in other words, because he's delusional, there's no issue of premeditation or cunning or scheming or goal orientation. It's all very unconscious. Whereas gaslighting is definitely goal-oriented, it's manipulative, Machiavellian, it's conscious, it involves planning and execution, feedback, and the gaslighter knows the difference between reality and fantasy at any given moment. A psychopath, for example, would gaslight you and would never lose sight of reality. It is in reality that the psychopath wants to realize his goals, so he cannot lose touch with reality. It's there that he would reap the rewards of the gaslighting. It is there that he would harvest the benefits of the gaslighting. So psychopath remains firmly in reality, intact reality testing. That's not the narcissist. Let me give you a simile. Imagine that you have a psychotic patient. The psychotic patient says, "Do you see this lady at the corner? She's flirting with me. She's grinning at me. She's winking at me. She's pouting at me. She's flirting with me." Of course, there's no lady at the corner. That's a hallucination. It's a psychotic person. Would you then say that the psychotic person is gaslighting you? Of course you wouldn't. Although he is trying to change your reality, your perception of reality. He is trying, the psychotic person is trying to convince you that you are deficient, that something's wrong with you. A paranoid, the same. A paranoid. You see all these conspiracy theories online, these paranoid people. And they would tell you that you are stupid. That if you don't believe in these conspiracy theories, something's wrong with you. Maybe someone bought you, paid you to not believe this. So they would challenge your perception of reality. They're gaslighting you, aren't they? No, they are not, because they believe they're conspiracy theories. They don't think they are falsifying something. Not that they want anything from you. There's no goal orientation here. No. So definitely narcissists don't gaslight. However, you raised an issue which baffles many people. Laymen, I'm talking, baffles many laymen. On the one hand, we say that narcissists are perfectly aware of their actions, and they are also capable of telling the difference between right and wrong. So we have all the elements of agency and all the elements of self-efficacy. We have the elements of mental health. These are people who know what they're doing, and they know whether what they're doing is considered to be wrong or right. One cannot use narcissistic personality disorder as an insanity defense. There is the ability to tell right from wrong and full control over one's impulses. We know this is the case because when we change the environment of the narcissist, the behaviors change dramatically. They get modified. So when we put a narcissist in prison, all narcissistic behaviors vanish overnight. Because if you are a classic narcissist in prison, it is not conducive to your life expectancy. Let's put it this way. It's a good idea to not be a narcissist in prison. And that's exactly what happens. They lose their narcissism. They behave completely differently, empathically even. So people say it's a choice because when they're in prison, they change. They can change. They're capable of change. So if they don't change, it means they don't want to change. They don't care about us. They have no incentive to change. But that is, of course, ignoring the fact that in prison, there is fear. The disappearance of narcissistic behaviors is the equivalent of playing dead, like animals that play dead when they're threatened. The narcissist freezes. It's a freeze response. So it's not real behavior modification. We know it's not real because the minute the narcissist exits prison, he reverts fully to his previous misconduct. So it seems to be a freeze reaction. And so the narcissist knows what he's doing, but disagrees with society's judgment and opinion about his actions. So the narcissist will do something truly evil, if you wish. And then when you tell the narcissist what you've done is really bad, really wrong, it's not okay, he will tell you, you are wrong. Society is wrong. I have acted out of altruism, tough love. I just wanted to help you. Also, he will reframe his actions in a manner which is self-enhancing, ego-syntonic, and self-justifying. So while narcissists know what they're doing, they disagree with the moral judgment of which pertains to what they're doing, and they are also 100% unconscious as to why they are doing what they're doing. They are 100% unaware of motivations and attitudes. They are very, in this sense, robotic. They go through the motions. These motions are largely inexorable. The motivations and attitudes are unconscious. They have no access to them. They don't have a clue as to why they've chosen a particular course of action rather than another. And they just know that they have to do it. It's compulsive in this sense. So narcissism is a compulsion. And indeed, Freud described it as repetition compulsion. So because it's compulsive, we know that in the case of obsessive compulsive personality disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, we know that the roots of the compulsion are totally submerged, they're totally unconscious. So you could describe the narcissist as a self-aware robot or a self-aware artificial intelligence. There is a code, a program that dictates the behavior of the machine, but this machine is capable of observing itself doing whatever it is that it's doing, but this machine is not aware of the programmer or the coder, if you wish, of the God. This machine has no God. And so that's why, while narcissists should be held accountable and responsible for their actions, it is wrong to say that it is a conscious choice. That is true of psychopaths. Psychopaths are perfectly capable of modulating their behavior. They make choices which are totally conscious. They're goal-oriented. They're capable of verbalizing the goals, conceptualizing the goal, embedding them in a bigger narrative, so they have a vision. So while psychopaths are impulsive and reckless, when you look at a larger period of time or bigger picture, it's clear that the psychopath is goal-oriented, and the goal dictates the actions. The whole process is premeditated, conscious, analytical, cunning, and so on. That's not the narcissist. The narcissist, I'm sorry to say, is nuts. It's a mentally ill wacko. It's a crazy person. As we would not judge the psychotic, we should not judge the narcissist. Now, I'm using those words on purpose. They're politically incorrect. They're very evocative because people can't seem to get it through their heads. It doesn't seem to penetrate the collective thick skull of victims and laymen alike. They attribute to the narcissist some demonic, evil, cunning and scheming. They're conflating narcissists and psychopaths. Narcissists are pitiful. They are at the mercy of their pathology. They're as much victims of the pathology as anyone else. And they have been victimized since age 1 or 2.
I think the tricky part is that you wake up to this reality in your family that your parents are this way. The risk is that you spend the majority of your life delving into all this and seeing yourself as maybe a victim, or you try to keep the narcissist accountable, but then there's no closure usually. And to me, that's my question is because it's tricky, right? Because sometimes maybe you have parents that have narcissistic qualities, but not maybe full-blown narcissism. For a lot of my clients, they are traditional, they maybe want to have family and they don't want to push their family completely away. And one of your videos had the top 10 reasons why you should leave your family if it's really abusive. Some people want to work with their family. They might limit contact, like just say on special occasions, or they want to maintain that relationship with their father, but the mom has got narcissistic qualities. But yeah, how do you make that discernment between when you should, because if someone's emotionally mature, like you said, I think you can deal with that to some degree. So how do you advise, I guess, your clients about that?
Pathological, but I don't have patients. I'm not a clinician. I'm a professor of clinical psychology, but I'm not a clinician. I have clients. I provide consultations, but I don't have patients. Just a long list a few minutes ago. It could be simply an insecure mother, a depressive mother, or an absent mother physically because she had to go away or got sick, or an emotionally absent mother because by nature she has an insecure attachment style. It doesn't have to be a narcissist. Or it could be a great mother, but the family as a unit is dysfunctional. For example, the mother is being abused by the father and consequently she's rendered dysfunctional. We call it adverse childhood experiences, ACE. Narcissism can emanate and emerge, which are not reflective of the quality of parenting. So you could, for example, divorce. A divorce could give rise to a narcissist. Domestic violence can give rise to a narcissist. Deaths in a family could give adversity. Adversity can give rise. On the flip side of this, we have parents who refuse to let the child grow up, separate from them, and become an individual in a million ways. Like emotional blackmail, I need you, don't go away, I will die if you leave me. I always dreamt of being a pianist or a doctor. I never made it, parentifying, and so on and so forth. Whenever the parental figures, crucially in the first 36 months, do not allow the child to develop healthy boundaries within which the self can emerge, boundaries which allow the child to interact with the environment in a secure manner, with peers, with others. When the parents don't allow the child to develop boundaries, they invade, they impose, they subsume. For example, they become overprotective. So whenever the boundaries are breached on a permanent basis, we have a narcissist. Narcissists don't do boundaries first and foremost with themselves, the symbiotic phase. Even when a narcissist develops a full-fledged relationship, for example, with an intimate partner, the narcissist, exactly like the borderline and the codependent, would try to merge and fuse with the intimate partner. The reasoning is different. The narcissist would do that in order to control the intimate partner. The borderline would do that to avoid abandonment. The codependent would do that to feel safe. Each one has different reasons. But they all do this. And this merger, this fusion with a narcissist is crucial because narcissists don't have a clue about boundaries, not theirs and not other people's. Because this is the case, I strongly recommend to go no contact, which is a set of 27 strategies I developed in the 80s. I recommend to go no contact. And I don't care if the narcissist is your mother, your daughter or son, your spouse, or your boss. You should go no contact. The cost of going no contact, financial, emotional, legal, and so on, would always be much less than the cost of maintaining a relationship A narcissist can damage you on a single Thanksgiving dinner, and the damage would last a whole year. Because narcissists, as you mentioned, possess cold empathy, and they cannot help it. It's unconscious, it's automatic, it's inexorable, it's robotic. They possess cold empathy. They penetrate your defenses. They map your vulnerabilities. They inventory your weaknesses. And then they pounce on you. They home in on you. They penetrate you. They invade you through the chinks in your armor. And they dissipate you. They destroy you from the inside. They have to do this because you threaten them as an external object. They must deanimate you. They must take away your life force. They must do this because the alternative is very threatening to them. Even minor exposure to a narcissist in the supermarket, the most minor exposure can have long-lasting consequences. That's why I say that narcissism is contagious, because exposure to narcissism triggers in you narcissistic defenses. Your empathy is like, you're likely to lose your empathy. You're likely to become highly aggressive when you deal with a narcissist. Yeah? You are likely to find yourself ultimately emulating and imitating the narcissist to the point of becoming one. And that's not a pleasant experience, of course. But the damage is serious. So no contact is the only... And people say, but I can't live financially. I don't buy any of this. I'm sorry. There are, of course, alternative techniques to use when you are in contact with a narcissist. But why be in contact? I've never come across a good reason to stay, ever. Not children, not money. I don't buy any of this.
I'm sure you come across, right, where let's say you grew up in this kind of family, but then you're an adult and you might start attracting those in your romantic relationship or your work environment. I think because subconsciously you're used to that dynamic. And so what to say, is it just becoming aware of that almost addictive quality that you might have towards these types of people? You don't want to shut out the whole world and become distrusting. And sometimes that's what people do. Maybe they're naive and they see only the good in people. But does that make sense that a child that grows up in that environment, if they're not narcissistic, might continue to attract those people into their life?
Not to attract, but to be attracted to.
Yeah.
Narcissists couldn't care less who you are because he cannot perceive you as an external object. It is a myth, an online myth, that narcissists select. They don't select anyone. They don't care if you're empathic or psychopathic. They don't care if you are kind or cruel. They don't care if you are nice or obnoxious. They don't give a damn about who you are. They care a lot about what it is that you can provide them with. Can you provide them with supply, narcissistic supply? Would you agree to participate in the shared fantasy and buttress the narcissist's inflated, fantastic self-concept? Would you play the roles that they assign to you? Would you provide them with sex, services, a sense of safety? Would you stick around despite the egregious abuse? So the auditioning process is about what's in it for me. And it's like an internet service provider. Do you really care who owns the internet service provider, how the office looks, what kind of refrigerator they have? You don't care about any of this. You care about the latency of the connection. Is your connection permanently on? Can you trust the connection? And what's the speed? That's how the narcissists see people. However, the reverse is not true. Whereas a narcissist is promiscuous and indiscriminate in choosing mates, as long as they can provide what he's looking for. The mates of narcissists, the people who end up being intimate partners of narcissists or friends, they are attracted to narcissists as a default. To start with, it's the comfort zone. They're used to it. They know the ropes, they know how to behave, they can predict the narcissist's conduct or misconduct. They have developed over the years coping strategies, survival strategies, adaptations. They're adapted. They're like, it's a lock and a key. It's like a substrate and a reagent. They're adapted to the narcissist. And they feel good, they feel comfortable, and they feel uncomfortable with a healthy person. They find a healthy person to be a bit threatening because they're unable to decipher and decode the internal dynamics of the healthy person. So they would push their partner to emulate and imitate a narcissist if he is not. So they would use something called projective identification. They would trigger and provoke narcissistic behavior in non-narcissists, just in order to feel comfortable or in order to reestablish the comfort zone. And so that's the first reason, the comfort zone. The second reason is that the narcissist caters to deep psychological needs of these people. Take, for example, someone with borderline personality disorder. One of the key features is dysregulation, emotional dysregulation or affective dysregulation, where the emotions are out of control, they overwhelm the individual with the borderline and threaten to drown the individual. The borderline is in search of an external regulator. What she wants to do, and I'm saying she because that's a tradition, but half of all borderline are men. What the borderline wants to do, she wants to outsource her internal regulatory functions. She wants someone else to regulate her emotions, stabilize her moods, make her feel good, and become a safe haven, a rock, a stable presence, so that she does not experience separation insecurity, abandonment anxiety. And she's in search of this external regulator, this service provider. And the narcissist is the perfect answer, because the narcissist exudes supreme self-confidence. The narcissist replaces reality with fantasy, which is much easier for the borderline. The narcissist takes over regulatory function with relish, because he wants to be the savior, the rescuer, the guru, the teacher. He loves it. So they're perfect for each other. She provides him with a fantastic buttressing of his self-concept. She admires him, agrees to participate in the fantasy. She caters to this need, and she renders him this godlike supreme figure in her life. She's likely to tell him, "You are my world. You are my world." So they're a perfect match. And the borderline would gravitate towards the narcissist because her main concern is about the stability, safety, and security afforded by the partner. She wants a rock. And the narcissist gives the impression, the counterfactual impression, ironically, that he is the most stable structure around. While in reality, of course, the narcissist is the most fragile and vulnerable in internal psychological structure. It's even more vulnerable and fragile than the psychotic, because the psychotic has a defense known as hyperreflexivity. The psychotic is hyperreflexive. He absorbs the world. So that gives him a sense of strength and stability. Psychotic is less fragile and less vulnerable than the narcissist. The borderline is less fragile and vulnerable than the narcissist. Narcissist is the most fragile and vulnerable construct ever. Both the overt and the covert. They're both very brittle and yet very deceptive. They tend to attract people who are looking for a leader, guidance, surety, and people who are looking to offload responsibilities to others so that they never feel guilty or ashamed, because it wasn't my choice, it wasn't my decision, it was his. And the borderline gravitates powerfully, irresistibly towards the narcissist. He appears to be the perfect solution. But the narcissist, for example, if he has a choice between a borderline and a completely healthy person, and the completely healthy person provides him with more, he would choose the healthy person. In this sense, it's not about the person, it's about the provision. So it's not true that the narcissist would always prefer the borderline. Depends. For example, is she irresistibly attracted to him and would participate in kinky sex? Would she admire him all the time, or would she become critical? Borderlines tend to be critical. They externalize aggression. So if she's critical, he doesn't care. He would walk away. So it's not true that the narcissist has a type. It is true that some types are attracted to narcissists.
Okay, that makes sense. And I know we've been talking for a little bit here, and maybe I can ask you one more question. In one of your videos, I think recently you talked about the notion that the narcissist doesn't have necessarily an inner child, but they are like a child. And then, but also you've talked about it, there's no self there other than maybe like skills. I think from my understanding, you're agnostic or atheist. Some people will talk about evil people. They like even say that maybe the devil's kind of whispering in their ear kind of thing. But I don't know, obviously you're a clinician. I don't think you go there in your ontology or way of understanding the world. But you do mention evil sometimes, but maybe it's more clinically defined. What are your thoughts about that as a child?
Exactly like people perceive the narcissist behavior as gaslighting and experience as gaslighting, and their experience is valid. They are being gaslit. People may experience the narcissist as evil, wicked, malevolent, malicious, and their experience is valid because they're harmed, they're hurt, they're damaged, they're broken, sometimes irretrievably. They have to spend many years on recovery and healing, if at all, and so on. It's an evil experience, but the narcissist is not evil. People should understand that, generally speaking, not only with narcissism, the way you experience something doesn't make it so. This is what we call magical thinking. Magical thinking is a primitive infantile defense where you say, if I experience something in a certain way, it means that it is this way. Magical thinking. If I wish something to happen, it will happen. If I just strongly wish it to happen, it will happen. This is children, 18 months old, 24 months old. That's the age for magical thinking. If I've experienced it as gaslighting, it is gaslighting. That's magical thinking. That's not science. The experience is that of an evil person. But evil requires premeditation. The devil is very goal-oriented. The devil is very cunning and scheming and premeditated. And the devil has a plan, and it knows what it wants to obtain and accomplish. And the devil is not a deluded, hallucinating psychotic. That's not our view of the devil. In this sense, if I ever use the word evil, doesn't belong in clinical psychology, of course. But if I were like with a gun to my head and have to, then I would use it with a psychopath, not with a narcissist. Psychopaths, to some extent, are what we used to call evil because they know they're going to hurt people. They don't care at all. They hurt people, and a substantial portion of psychopaths greatly enjoy doing so because there is a high comorbidity of sadism with psychopathy, known as malignant narcissists, psychopathic narcissists. So when you see someone who harms you and hurts you on purpose in a manner which is disproportional to the benefit they derive, so they would kill you to take $50 from you, for example. They harm you disproportionately, and the benefit is minimal. If you see this disproportionality, if you see someone who enjoys doing so, relishes, is elated by it, euphoric, maybe then you're justified in calling such a person evil. They know, they can tell right from wrong. They know the difference between reality and fantasy. They know that what they're doing is wrong in the eyes of society. They couldn't care less. They're a law unto themselves, and they hurt in a disproportional manner. I think the key here mostly is disproportionality. Because people can become deluded and then they can hurt you, but they would do this in a way that they find morally justified. And so they would strive to maintain some proportionality. Even in the most extreme cases, for example, genocide. In genocide, the perpetrators are very often deluded because they believe that the people they're killing constitute an existential threat. When Nazi Germany exterminated the Jews, they exterminated the Jews because they believed the Jews are going to kill all the Germans. It was a complete delusion, insane for all intents and purposes, but they did believe it. So there was proportionality. They perceived the Holocaust as an act of self-defense. But with a classic psychopath, this proportionality, he would not hesitate to cut your throat, to walk away with $20. It is this disproportionality, the fact that he regards you as dispensable, disposable, interchangeable. He objectifies you to the extreme. You're nothing but an impediment. You're nothing but an obstacle to be removed by any means. There is no moral judgment here. It's done in an impersonal, impulsive, disinterested way. You're like dust. You have to sweep the dust away. That's what psychopath does. This, I think, comes closest to evil, if I had to use the word. Narcissism is nothing like that, nothing of the sort, not even remotely. Narcissism is driven by his own demons. Narcissism is the victim of abuse, a victim who has gone awry, a victim who has chosen to become an abuser as a solution to the overwhelming emotions he experienced. He said, I'm going to be a victim no more. From now on, I'm going to be on top. I'm going to be the abuser. It's a dysfunctional solution, a wrong solution and everything. But this is a driven person. In the medieval ages, we would have said it's a possessed person. Can you hold them responsible and accountable for their actions? It's dubious. Even in the 16th century, there were moral debates as to the culpability of witches. Those of them who were already possessed by Satan, huge debates about this. Should they be burned and executed and so on? Are they at all responsible? Or are they victims of Satan? You know, the narcissist is a victim driven by memories of the victimhood which he's haunted, and he can't help it. He can't help what he's doing. The key here is agency. If you can help what you're doing and you still do it, you're evil. If you can't help what you're doing, never mind the harm you cause, you're not evil. You should be put away, should be punished, should be executed even. Of course, society should defend itself against you, but you're not evil. You're a danger, and I compare it to a virus. A virus kills millions of people. Is it evil? In which sense is a virus evil? It can never be evil. It has no self-control, no sentience, no consciousness, it's not evil. It's driven, programmed, but it's not evil. And yet the outcomes are evil. Millions of people dying, that's evil. We should not confuse our experience with reality. These are two separate things. And if you confuse the two, then something's wrong with you.
That makes sense. And just to touch on that, you said that the narcissist can present like a child, right? They're looking for your empathy. There's this innocent maybe part that they can show, but then maybe in the past you would be empathetic. Okay, maybe they're just like young, immature. But I find that they can also be aggressive at the same, so they can be a bully, but also be this innocent child almost, but that's just them feigning, like it's not a true. I think you said something like that. There's not that they can be like children, but they don't have no inner child.
The false self is godlike, and because it is godlike, it's all-encompassing, exactly like God. So it's a religion. It's an absolute religion. The false self is a deity. The narcissist makes human sacrifice. He sacrificed himself as a child, and he sacrifices you to the false self. It's a primitive religion with human sacrifice. And it's a missionary religion. The narcissist tries to convert you to his religion, to his fantasy. The false self being a deity, it is all-encompassing. You could conceive of the false self as a library with an infinite number of manifestations. The false self can manifest as a child, as a great leader, and the next minute as a genius, and the next minute as utterly stupid. So everything is contained in the false self. And when the narcissist comes across an intimate partner, the narcissist wants to reenact early childhood conflicts with the mother who never let him go, who did not allow him to separate and become an individual, who abused him in a variety of ways. It's not getting back at mother, it's not payback. It's the compulsion to reenact this unfinished business, this unresolved chapter, this conflict that has never ended. The narcissist attempts to do this by converting you into a maternal figure, into a substitute mother. In order for you to accept your role as a mother, as an intimate partner, as a best friend, you're a mother figure. Even best friend is a mother figure. Even when you are two males, you're the mother figure to the narcissist. For you to accept this role, you need a child. You can't be a mother without a child, obviously. So, in order for you to become the mother, the narcissist becomes a child. In the initial phases, which is spotting, auditioning, love bombing, idealization, and so on, what the narcissist does, in order to induct you into the fantasy within which you are his mother, he becomes your child. The false self manifests as a child. And it's not just any child. It's a suffering child. It's a child in need of help and protection. And it triggers your maternal instincts. Everyone has maternal instincts. If you ever saw men interacting with a baby, you know that men also have maternal instincts. So it triggers in your maternal instincts. And you wish to protect this child, to heal the child. You develop the delusion that your love will somehow complete this child, allow this child to escape, to emerge from this enchantment, this spell, awaken the child, revive it somehow. And so you're drawn into this role as a mother because the child triggers in you protective instincts, reflexes actually, not instincts, protective reflexes. And this is the role of the child guise, of the child disguise of the false self. Now that you have mentioned religion, the devil is supposed to be like that. The devil can present himself in a variety of forms, manifestations, and guises. That's why in exorcism we say that we are casting out not a specific demon, but a legion of demons. So if you want a religious comparison, it's like that. Before you know it, the narcissist baits you and reels you in a maternal role, having interacted with you initially as a child. Now, he doesn't have to be a child in the sense that he doesn't use an infantile voice, but he becomes a bit helpless. He becomes a bit needy. He informs you that his survival depends on you, emotional and maybe physical even. He makes you, he renders you indispensable. He introduces you into his life as a condition for his own existence and for his own becoming. And victims would say, when he's with me, he's alive. When he's with me, he's so happy. When he's so, and that's like, you make me be. So you can't just walk away. It's like a mother giving up on her child. It's even worse. It's like murder. Because you say to yourself, if I walk away, he will revert to his dead state that preceded me. He was dead before he met me. I gave him life. And indeed, mothers give life. So I gave him life. And not to walk away is to orphan this child and to kill it as well, to murder it. Who can do that? Very few. That is the glue that holds the narcissist and you together. That's the glue, the super glue that won't allow you to walk away. The grief when you do walk away is overwhelming because you are grieving not only the fantasy and not only having lost a mate or an intimate partner, but you're grieving the child, your child. And you're also grieving your own mother because a narcissist later on plays the role of your mother. He loves you unconditionally. He idealizes you. And then you can see yourself through the narcissist's gaze. There are intricate motherhood dynamics in the initial phase of the shared fantasy. He gives you a chance for a second childhood, and he asks you to become his mother, which allows him to reenact the conflict with his original mother. The child bait is irresistible and stays with you even long after the relationship is over. And all victims would tell you this, that they saw the child inside, the inner child. They were interacting with some childish aspect that reminded them of their own children or children in general. This is such a common refrain among victims. It's clearly a technique. The narcissist infantilizes himself, then infantilizes you, never mind, but initially infantilizes himself. He triggers your maternal reflexes. It's a technique. But is he doing it intentionally? No, it's unconscious. It's robotic, it's automatic. Technique implies choice, intentionality, there's premeditation, and there's implementation. That's not how the narcissist does this. It's triggered in him. It's triggered. He's absolutely, and most of the time he's not even aware of it. If you were to talk to narcissists, as I've been doing for 30 years, and ask them about this stage, they would deny it vehemently. It's no way. I'm a man's man. I'm virile, I'm this, I'm that. If it's a man or a woman would say, I'm not a child, you're wrong. I was his mother, not his child. They would deny this phase. Completely unself-aware of these unconscious dynamics. So in which sense are they responsible for it? In which sense is this a technique? Where's the evil here? You can't blame them for this.
Yeah, no, it's definitely helpful. The tricky part is that these people are never really diagnosed. And so often my clients are just always wondering, is my parent a narcissist or emotionally mature? How do I have contact with them? Do I not?
A common myth, a prevalent myth, is that narcissists do not attend therapy and consequently they are underdiagnosed. It's a myth in the sense that it applies to all mental health disorders. People with psychosis are extremely reluctant to attend therapy. Borderlines are very arrogant, grandiose, and many of them are reluctant to attend therapy. And when they do, and they're given the diagnosis, they reject it. Majority of them reject it. Bipolar, people with bipolar would never attend therapy, especially in the manic phase. So it's not unique to narcissists. all people with mental disorders and illnesses are averse to being labeled, stigmatized, and exposed to manipulation and intervention as they see it. How do we know how many there are? We use extremely powerful population and cohort statistics. This is called sampling. We know how many people approach or end up in clinical settings that have psychosis, how many end up with narcissism, how many end up with borderline personality disorder, and so on. And then we have tools, statistical tools, that remove the bias, that render the results significant, that adjust for specific parameters like age, sex, socioeconomic background, and so on. We know how to do this. We've been doing this for more than 100 years. The figures are reliable. The fact that narcissists do not attend therapy applies to all other mental health illnesses. If you challenge the statistics of narcissistic personality disorder, you should challenge the statistics of all other personality disorders. We know, for example, that in major depression, the majority of people do not go to therapy. They're too depressed. They can't leave the bed. And yet, we have statistics for all mental illnesses and disorders, and we consider them pretty reliable. So it's a yes or no situation. Either you reject all statistics and say, I don't believe any of these statistics because people with mental illnesses and mental health disorders do not attend therapy, are averse to therapy. Okay, it's all right. It means generally that you have no idea, not the slightest idea about statistics, but it's okay. But what you cannot do is say the statistics about psychotic people are reliable. The statistics about autism are reliable, which we now know are extremely unreliable. But the statistics about narcissism are not reliable. You cannot pick and choose. Either you believe the tools we have, or you don't believe the tools we have. And you have no middle ground. You can't pick and choose. So here are the numbers. 1.7% of the general population have narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not saying diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. I'm saying have narcissistic personality disorder. 1.7%, that's all. Not 10, not 15. There's a self-styled expert online with an academic degree who goes around spewing nonsense that 1/6 of the population are narcissists. That's the kind of misinformation I have to cope with day in and day out. An academic degree in psychology does not guarantee that you know what you're talking about in all fields of psychology. It doesn't guarantee that you know what you're talking about when it comes to narcissism. And so people think if you have a PhD in psychology, then automatically you're an expert on narcissism. I don't know much about schizophrenia. I wouldn't walk around saying I'm an expert on schizophrenia. But I've spent 30 years studying narcissism. I think I am an expert on narcissism. So it's 1.7%, period, not 16%. And half of these are women. We're beginning to accept this. It was difficult to accept. In the 1980s, in the third edition of the DSM and so on, we believed that 75% of narcissists were men. Today, we're beginning to accept that it's equally divided, possibly because women are becoming more manly. They assume masculine gender roles and gender adjectives. So they self-describe as men. And so maybe it has something to do with masculinity, narcissism. But right now, half and half, women and men in narcissism. The chance that you have come across a narcissist is minuscule, is very small. Over 100 people you meet on a daily basis, fewer than 2 are narcissists. Not 10, not 16, definitely not half. Fewer than 2. And of these, one would be covert and one would be overt. And so when people say, all my family are narcissists, my mother, my father, my siblings, my grandmother, that is unmitigated nonsense. There's no bearing or relationship on reality. Everyone in my workplace is a narcissist, or my boss and these 2 co-workers are narcissists in a workplace of 10 people. Not going to happen.
Could you say, though, like, is this on a spectrum to some degree, like narcissistic qualities?
I'm talking about narcissistic personality disorder. There is something called narcissistic style. It was first described by Len Sperry, the famous psychoanalyst at the time. And the notion was adopted by giants like Theodore Millon. It's accepted today. There's something called narcissistic style, And these are people who are subclinical narcissists. In other words, they have narcissistic traits and narcissistic behaviors, but they don't have the psychological damage that characterizes narcissists. For example, they're able to tell the difference between reality and fantasy. They can tell the difference between external objects and internal objects. They do have some empathy. They do have access to positive emotion. Narcissistic style is someone who is obnoxious, abrasive, exploitative, reduced empathy, definitely, self-aggrandizing, boastful to some extent, but it's a far cry from pathological narcissism, far cry from narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is a sickness. It's a little comparing someone who has a vivid imagination and can visualize things with a psychotic who has hallucinations. The key difference is that people with narcissistic style can control their behaviors, modify and modulate behaviors. They can make choices and decisions. Narcissists are helpless. Their disorder is unforgiving and overpowering. There's nothing they can do about it. You may have come across people with narcissistic style. Studies show that the narcissistic style is increasing in our civilization, especially among young people. It's because narcissistic style pays. It's a positive adaptation. If you're narcissistic style, you end up being president of the United States. So it's likely that you have met quite a few people with narcissistic style. If you're young, even more. It's very unlikely that you met a narcissist in your entire life, by the way. Because how many people have 100 close people? How many people have 100 close friends and family? Very few. Of these 100, 1.5 are narcissists. So it's actually pretty likely that you have never met a narcissist, never come across one. However, we label, we stigmatize. Today, everyone is an expert on narcissism. And of course, everyone's mother-in-law is a narcissist. And so we label people, we throw it, bandy it about. Narcissism is also helpful as an organizing and hermeneutic principle. Narcissism allows us to make sense of the world. When we try to understand a certain politician, if we apply to him the etiquette of narcissist, suddenly his actions and behaviors make sense. When we try to understand why we have been betrayed by our best friend, if we apply to him the label of narcissism, it has meaning, direction, goal, makes sense of the world, makes sense of specific industries, like the entertainment industry, politics, and so on, makes sense of people around us. Sometimes narcissism helps us to make sense of ourselves. So we call it a hermeneutic principle. It's a principle that makes sense of the world. It's also an organizing principle, because if you look at society in postmodern civilization, narcissism helps to organize it, helps to structure it. For example, modern technologies cater to narcissism. They enhance narcissism. They reward narcissism. So narcissism organizes and structures, for example, social media. That's why people think that narcissism is everywhere. But social narcissism has nothing to do with the pathology. Narcissism as a structural principle has nothing to do with the pathology. People who are obnoxious are not necessarily narcissists, very likely not. Don't go around labeling everyone, especially if you're not qualified to diagnose, which the overwhelming vast majority of people are not qualified to diagnose. Don't become an armchair self-imputed psychologist, because that's exactly what a narcissist would do.
And I guess the risk you think is that if you think your parents have maybe narcissistic qualities or emotional maturity, but you keep trying to interact with them, but each time they show these characteristics. I guess what I'm just trying to say, for your own protection, is it better? Like, you don't want to label the world and reject people, but sometimes people continue to be exposed.
Why do we have to label? Why do you have to be a diagnostician in order to make decisions in your life?
That's true.
The person you're with, do you feel good with them or bad with them? If you feel bad with them, walk away. Why do you need to know if they're narcissists or psychopaths or
I guess it's
manic?
when it's family, you don't want to give up on them.
If they are egregiously abusive, walk away. It's nothing to do with narcissism. Why do we need this? Pathological narcissism should be left to clinicians, scholars, diagnosticians. It's none of the layman's business. It's very bad that it's out there on YouTube. It's not helping anyone. There's a lot of misinformation. People make wrong decisions. Families break down. It's a mess. I'm not happy with it at all. I contributed to it, unfortunately. But I'm not happy with the outcome. It's been corrupted completely. Pathological narcissism is a clinical entity and it should be left to psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, and so on. Exactly the way cancer is left to medical doctors. End of story. You can discuss unpleasant people, obnoxious people, abusive people, contemptuous people as a layman. You can make your decision whether you're willing to live with such misbehavior, coexist with this misconduct. But the minute you start to label, you're acting the way a narcissist does. Because narcissists believe that they're omniscient. They don't need education. They don't need study. They don't need training. They know everything already. So if you go around diagnosing people, you're actually acting exactly like a narcissist would. If you go around demonizing narcissists, that is splitting. That's an infantile defense known as splitting. I'm all good, the narcissist is all bad. You know who is doing this? Narcissists. Narcissists and borderlines have a splitting defense. After all, if you go around diagnosing people and demonizing people, you may wish to sit back and ask yourself, am I the narcissist? Am I just projecting? And that's a dangerous game. So don't start.
Great. No, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time and have a good day.
Take care. You too. Bye-bye.